Thanks. Okay.
I thought somebody...
Good afternoon, everybody. And a thank you to David and Rebecca, who graciously sponsored the Lunch and Learn this week. So thank you very much. Yes, Chayefka.
When I was in Israel, I just mentioned, everyone salts their bread during the week as well as Shabbos. So I said, shouldn't we have salt? And when I asked, they said it's in the Shulchan Aruch. So I think, well, that's like the Constitution. So should we have salt on the table?
It's best to. It's best to.
It's best to. That's why you should have salt, yeah.
Okay. So we're going to be discussing today some very actually interesting situations that we have. We have it this year. We have it next year going a lot further. And that is the different ways that we split up our Torah reading. And as in this year and next year, again, even crazier, how we go off schedule with Israel. And we actually have completely different Torah readings for weeks now. It's only this Shabbos that we're going to get ourselves realigned. Right? So the question is, why do we go off? And why do we wait so long to realign? And what are the ramifications, halachic ramifications in the interim for a person traveling, right, with their being off, either missing or hearing something twice, right? How does one deal with those situations as they arise? So the first page, I have basically, I skipped some, I wanted to get it all on one page. But basically, if you look at this little spreadsheet we have over here, we have the Shabbos date, we have the parsha outside of Israel, and we have the parsha in Israel. So look at the top, October 4th, right? That was a Shabbos, and it was Yom Kippur.
This is this year.
This is this past year.
Oh, sorry.
Okay?
Yeah.
So, therefore, we didn't do our regular Torah reading, nor did they in Israel do their regular Torah reading. Right? So, well, actually, let me back up just one or two steps. There are 54 parshiot of the Torah. Okay? Now, how many weeks do we have in any given Jewish year? 355, right? So we have a Jewish year of 354 days. So 350 is 50 Shabboses. In the remaining 4 days, we have possibility of either 50 or 51 Shabboses.
Is that a non-leap year?
That's a non-leap year. Okay. So it should be very simple. We should have 51 parshiot and all should be fine. Right? And that way we're always safe. Except, as Steve pointed out, sometimes we have a leap year. Where we have an added month. Which could bring us up further. Okay? Also, another factor is we have holidays that when they fall out on Shabbos, that as we see the very first case, October 4th, Yom Kippur, and October 11th, Sukkot, day 3. So those were days that we didn't have a special Torah reading, the usual Torah reading for that week, because we had the special Torah reading for Yom Kippur, the special Torah reading for Sukkot. But being that both outside of Israel and Israel both had their regular Torah readings pushed off, we stayed in sync with one another. Okay, so we have the 54 parshiot, and that serves almost like an accordion, that we can open it up and close it down based on the needs of each and every year. We have the potential for seven double parshiot. And there are specific parshiot that we double up and others which never get doubled up. So on our chart over here, if you look through, so October 18th was Bereshit in Israel and outside of Israel. I skipped a bunch of parshiot till I got to Vayikra, which is the last one in Bereshit. That was January 3rd, both in and out of Israel. In Bereshit, we have no parshiot that can or ever get doubled up. Shmot, we were the same. January 10th, January 17th, January 28th, March 7th, March 14th, being that this is not a leap year, and we had and we will have days of Yom Tov that are going to knock off Torah readings. Keep in mind that Pesach is 7 days, 8 days in Chutz La'aretz. So that always knocks off a parsha. Sukkot is 8 days, 9 days outside of Israel. That always knocks off at least one parsha. So Vayakel Pekudei on March 14th, both we and in Israel joined them up. 21st of March, Vayikra. 28th of March, Tzav, both for Israel and outside of Israel. The 4th of April, as we remember, that was Pesach day 1. That neither us nor in Israel had our regular Torah reading. What happened over here this year on 4/11, April 11th, outside of Israel we keep an extra day. It was the 8th day of Pesach. There it says Pesach, day 8, special readings. In Israel, it was the day after Pesach. They have 7 days of Pesach, not 8. Their Pesach ended on Friday. Shabbos for them was a regular day. That's why, again, on 4/11/2015, we have regular Shabbat, Shmini. Now, April 18th, as you see on the chart, we're off kilt. We read Shmini, they read Tazria and Mitzorah. Okay? 25, we read Tazria and Mitzorah. They read Acharei Mot and Kedoshim. May 2nd, we read Acharei Mot and Kedoshim. They read Emor. May 9th, this past Shabbos, we read Emor. They read Bahar. This Shabbos we catch up. We're reading Bahar and Bechukotai. They split up May 9th, May 16th, Bahar, Bechukotai. And therefore we're now on par, on even kill. Bamidbar Naso Balotcha Shlach Korach Chukat Balak. Okay, now I have number 1 on the outside. That's 1 in Shemot by Vayakel Pekudei. Number 2 is in Vayikra. Number 3 is in Vayikra. Number 4 is in Vayikra. Number 5, this year we're not splitting up Korach Chuka, but those two can go together. Number 6 is in Bamidbar Matot Masai. We do join them together. And Nitzav and Vayelech. So this year, of the 7 that could be joined together, and I'm not sure, but probably some of the Yelech are also together, I believe we have 6, we certainly have 5 that we joined together. Why did we have so many double parshiot this year? Because we had it's not a leap year, so we had the 354, not an additional 4 weeks to add on, and we had quite a bit of overlap. Right? We had Yom Kippur as overlap when it often is not. We had Sukkot that always is, and we outside of Israel had a double. Pesach is 8 days. Right? Chances are it's only going to knock out one Shabbos. Being that this year we started on Shabbos and ended on Shabbos, we had a double knockout outside of Israel. That is why it was adjusted the way it was. That's why we went off kilt. And this is how this Shabbos we're getting back on pace.
I have a question.
Okay, yeah,
The question is, are they doubling up parshas that are a little bit shorter so it's not...
Sometimes yes and sometimes not, okay? So I want to deal with that soon, right? We're going to see a very, right? Take a look on 21st of March.
Okay.
right? Vayikra,
Right.
okay? And 28th of March, Tzav.
Yeah.
For some reason, after Tzav, we have Tasriya Mitzora, Achrei Mod Kedoshim, Emor Bahar B'chukotai. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 parshiot between Tzav and Bamidbar, and for some reason, of those 7, 3 of them or 6 of them get doubled up.
Yeah.
So for some reason, we seem to have this want to double things up in Vayikra between Tzav and Bamidbar. Again, we have 7 parshiot, 6 of those become doubled up. We're left with Emor, which stands alone, but Tazriya Mitzora, Achrei Kedoshim, Bahar B'chukotai get doubled up. So there seems to be a reason, a want, a drive to condense those readings. We'll need to understand why that is. Steve.
Are these things covered by Shulchan Aruch, or
Somewhat.
do the rabbis?
Somewhat. We're going to see some sources in a few moments.
But can it be that the rabbis of present day
No, this is all well established.
well established?
Yes. Now, yes, David.
They could have busted up Tazria and Mitzora instead of Bahar B'chukotai and put us back in the sync a lot quicker
Good
so that
point.
everybody would be unified. So there
Good
must be a
point.
precedence, right?
Good point. Right? So one reason, one thing we'll need to investigate is why do we have this concentration of the double parshio between Tzav and Bamidbar? Okay? Another point is why are we staying apart so long? Right? What we, well, let's see. In Israel, they had Tazria and Mitzora together. So you're saying, yeah, Dave's making a great point. On April 18th, when we're doing Shmini, they could have done Tazria. On April 25th, when we did Tazria Mitzora, they would have done Mitzora. And pell-mell, within 2 weeks, we're back aligned.
How about that?
Right? So why didn't they do that? Why are we waiting until May 17th? And I'm sorry that I messed up that very first row. By Bamidbar, I cut it off. I shouldn't have cut it off. Right? What it says there is week before Shavuot, May 21st. Okay? Or May 23rd, sorry. Right? That's right. Okay. So that's a good question to ask. Now let me just point out, next year, Pesach falls out again on Shabbos. So next year we have the same exact situation. But the same exact situation that the first day of Pesach for everyone is on Shabbos. And then Israel ends Pesach that Friday. For us, Shabbos is still Pesach. So we're going to go off. But next year, instead of getting together May 17th,
You can get together.
or May 16th, whatever it is, next year, it is a Shana Mu'uberet. There's an extra month of Adar.
Oh.
So we don't have, that's when the accordion is opened up. We don't have many double parshiot. The double parshiot is what gives us the flexibility to get back aligned. So we have David's question, why do we do it earlier? But putting that aside, that's what gives us the flexibility, the ability that when we're doubling up, they'll spread it out and we're together. And next year, it won't be until Matot Masai, which is number 6 on our list over there. Matot Masai, which is about 3 months later. That's when we're going to get aligned again. So at this point, we want to investigate, why do we have them bunched up that within these 7 weeks we have 6 parshiot that get doubled. We have 3 double parshiot, right? Which will also speak to where does this come from, this whole alignment. We also want to address David's point, right? Only because he's sponsored, otherwise I'll just ignore his point, right? We want to address David's point. Why don't we jump in and get aligned earlier? Why are we waiting until, waiting another month we get aligned? And what is one to do when one travels? Yes, Dov.
It seems like we're more accordion over here in Goras.
Okay, so let's take a look.
Does it also have to do with this? There's some parshas that seem to go together.
Okay,
Like
that's also...
Masay, I always go
Okay,
together.
Tazria and Mitzorah certainly
together.
both go together,
Yeah.
conceptually. Let's take a look at that for a moment. Okay? Vayakel and Pekudei conceptually can go together. Vayakel and Pekudei, Vayakel is the reiteration of the building of the kalim, of the vessels of the Mishkan, of the sanctuary. And Pekudei is the reiteration of the garments of the Kohanim, right? And it concludes with the completion of the Mishkan and God's presence filling in there. Conceptually, Vayakel and Pekudei go together nicely. Number 2, Tazria and Mitzorah both deal with different types of leprosies. Those two go together. Achrei Mot and Kedoshim are a bit more we would call strange bedfellows, right? They are Achrei Mot. It's not as easy a fit, okay? Bahar b'chukotai really don't go that well together. We're going to address that soon. Bahar and b'chukotai don't go all that well together. Bahar is predominantly about Shemitah. B'chukotai, okay, you can say they are connected. B'chukotai is the tochacha, the horrific klala which will come, and there are psukim that say that's because you didn't keep Shemitah. Okay, those are Matot Masai, Nitzavim Vayelech, a little bit less conceptually linked. Let's take a look on page 2 of the source sheet at the Gemara. This is the Gemara in Megillah. And the Gemara in Megillah, at this point, towards the very end of the tractate, is going through the different readings and the different Haftorah readings on different days. So I have it both in English, that's blocked off over there, boxed in, and following this arrow is where the Hebrew begins. And here, of course, is the English in that box. Tani Milot in a Braita. Rosh Hashanah Omer. Ezra tikein lehen li Yisroel. Ezra is the one who established. Well, Moshe said we should be reading about the holidays in their times. Ezra established that we read the entire Torah every year. Actually, the Gemara Megillah mentions that there was a different custom. I think in Yerushalayim, where it would be a 3-year cycle as opposed to a 1-year cycle. Okay, Moshe Ezra established the Yisroel Shiyukorin Klalot Shebetorat Kohanim. There is the klala, the curse, the tochacha, the reproof, the horrific things that will come to us if we as a nation don't keep the Torah. That we have in Bechukotai. So therefore that was established that we should read it Kodem Atzeret, prior to Shavuot. B'Sheva Mishnah Torah, Kodem Rosh Hashanah. And the Klala, the Tochacha that's found in the last of the 5 books of the Torah, right? That's in Devarim Parshat Kitavo. That should be read Kodem Rosh Hashanah, prior to Rosh Hashanah. So the 2 Tochachot, we want to read one of them before Shavuot, the other one before Rosh Hashanah. My time, what's the reason? Amar Abaye says the Item, others say it was not Abaye, but it was Reish Lakish who said this. Kadesha Tichla Hashana V'Kilaloteha. We want the year to end with all of its curses.
Why?
We want the year to end with all of the curses and start the new year
The curses
to
or-
end.
Oh,
Right?
right.
All the curses should end with that year. The next year should be a fresh, clean, blessed slate. Now, that's an explanation for what? For which? We mentioned we want to read Bechukotai before Shavuot, and we read Kitavo before Rosh Hashanah, so the year will end along with all of its curses. What is the Rosh Hashanah? Rosh Hashanah. Shavuot of Rosh Hashanah? It's not. So the Gemara says, Bishlama, I understand Sheba Mishnah Torah. Your explanation works. Why we want to read Kitavo before Rosh Hashanah. Ika, there, you've got it. That is read right before Rosh Hashanah. What's Rosh Hashanah? The start of the new year. I understand your reasoning. Kadesha tichle shana v'kilalotea. Let the year and its curses end. Ella, but shebetorat kohani. Right? We want to read Bechukotai. Right? This Shabbos, we're going to read Bahar Bechukotai together because we want the year to end with its curses. Atu Atzeret Rosh Hashanah? Is Shavuot the new year?
No.
Not that I know of. The Gemara says yes. Atzeret Nami Rosh Hashanah. Atzeret is also considered a Rosh Hashanah, as we had mentioned actually in our Tuesday morning class, the parsha class, the Tanan. The Mishnah in Rosh Hashanah says there are 4 points that are considered Rosh Hashanah, and we say Uba Atzeret. Atzeret, Shavuot, is considered the Rosh Hashanah al Peirot HaIlan. It is the judgment day, the deciding point of what will be with the fruits of the tree the next year. Of course, a judgment means how it affects humankind. So we want to finish the year and its curses, so we read Bechukotai right before Shavuot. Any problem with that statement that I just made? We read Bechukotai right before Shavuot? Is this Shabbos the Shabbos that's right before Shavuot?
No.
No, it's not.
We have one more.
We have one more. Next Shabbos is the Shabbos that's right before Shavuot. Shavuot, the holiday Shavuot is Saturday night, Sunday, Sunday night, Monday. If you have not yet signed up to give one of the parshiot, Your Honor, please do sign up to present to us. Okay, so Tosfot deals with that. That we don't have a translation in English. You'll follow as best you can in Hebrew, and I'll explain as we go along. The second big arrow. L'kach nirli atam, Tosfot says, it seems to me the reasoning, sha'anu machalkid otam, that we split it up, l'fi sha'anu rotzim lahafsik. We want there to be a buffer. V'likrot Shabbat achat kodem Rosh Hashanah. He's talking about Nitzav and Vayelech, that we split them up. We want to have 1 week before Rosh Hashanah, beparsha, shelo tehei medaber beklalot klal. We want to have a week when we're not talking about the klalot, shelo lahasmich haklalot l'Rosh Hashanah. So as not to have the curses right adjacent to Rosh Hashanah. So it's not just wanting to end before Rosh Hashanah. We wanted to end the Shabbos before Rosh Hashanah, in order that we've got a buffer. We read those klalot, then we have a regular reading, and then we have Rosh Hashanah. Umitam zeh, and that based on this reason he says, Anu korim b'midbar Sinai. We read the parsha of Bamidbar next Shabbos, which is the Shabbos right before Shavuot. There we're going to read Bamidbar, Kodem Atzeret, that we read that the Shabbos before Shavuot, Kedei shelo lahasmich haklalot shebebechukotai la'atzeret. We don't want to have bechukotai and then Shavuot. Therefore, we want to have Bamidbar and then Shavuot. Now, this is starting to give us a little bit of a glimpse into understanding why we have such a concentration of double parshiot leading into Bamidbar. Again, the 7 parshiot before Bamidbar, 6 of those become or can become doubled up. So I understand my end point. I want to get Bamidbar in right before Shavuot. That's going to cause me to start doubling up parshiot prior to Bamidbar. So I understand the end point. I don't yet understand the beginning point. Meaning, these 3 double parshiot could have been spread out throughout Shemot and Vayikra. It doesn't need to be out of the 7 consecutive parshiot, 6 of them become doubled up. So now that we've seen the end point, let's also look at the beginning point. If you look back on our first graph, 4/11/2015 is Shemini, right? Before that is Tzav, okay? So it seems we want to keep those somewhat. We want to have that beginning point. Let's take a look now at the last page that I gave you, which is the Shulchan Aruch. Okay? And I did a little cutting and pasting. Thank you so much. Thank you. That's good. Thank you. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehakol nהיה b'dvaro. Okay, so I did a little cutting and pasting. Actually, this page ended here and continued on the next page in order to have a little less copies to make. Let's start by Seif Dalet here, okay? The Dalet over there, my magic marker line, it's 4 lines above that, right in the middle of the line. La'olam korin tzav et Aaron kodem Pesach bipshuta. Oh, that helps us. That's our beginning point. We always want to read Tzav before Pesach, at least in a regular year. Oh, so we've got looking back at our little chart over here. We've got a serious problem over here. 28th of March, Tzav. That we want to read it before Pesach. We'll soon understand why. I want to read Tzav before Pesach, and I want to read Bamidbar before Shavuot. Now let's count it up. Right? Tzav before Pesach. How many weeks do I have from Pesach to Shavuot? We should know this. 7 weeks. That's what the spirit that we're counting.
7 complete weeks.
We have 7 complete weeks from Pesach to Shavuot. So we have 7 weeks. And what do we have to take care of? Shmini, Tazria, Mitzora, Achrei Mot, Kedoshim, Emor, Bahar, B'chukotai, Bamidbar.
Hello.
Does Kodem Pesach mean before Pesach or just before Pesach?
Ideally just before Pesach. La Briyut. So again, for those 7 weeks, and keep in mind it's not 7 weeks. It's 7 weeks, but 1 entire week is Pesach, which has to knock out 1 of our regular Shabbos readings. So maximally, we've got 6. This year we had 5, right? Because first and 8th day in Chutz La'aretz. So maximally, you've got 6 regular Torah parsha readings, during which you want to take care of Shemini, Tazria, Mitzora, Achrei Mot, Kedoshim, Emor, Bahar, B'chukotai, and Bamidbar. Maximally, you've got 6 weeks to do 9 parshiot. Now I understand why our double parshiot needed to get condensed into this time period. Tzav before, now I've got 9, I've got to condense them. Right? So, we have Shmini, Tazria Mitzora we double up. Achrei Mo Kedoshim we double up. Emor we double up. Bahar B'chukotai, right? We double up. And Bamidbar. Okay? So now we understand why we are so condensed in that time period. Okay. Let's take a look a little further in the halacha there. Umitzor b'muberet chus mi bet heichet muberet. Okay, shakon achrei mot. Ula'olam. Now the third to last of the lines above that magic marker line, the last two words. Ula'olam korin parshat bamidbar Sinai kodem atzeret. And we always need to read Bamidbar right before Atzeret. We know why that is. That's what we saw in the Tosfot, in the Gemara. Why do we always want to read Bamidbar before Shavuot? Because we want to...
Read about the getting of the tent.
No! Why do we want to read Bamidbar right before Shavuot?
Is that to do with what happens in the story?
No! We want... What did the Gemara say?
The fruit curse?
No!
We've got to do B'chukotai and we've got to have a buffer.
We need to end the year and its curses, and we need to have a buffer. That was the Gemara that we learned. Right? That was the Gemara that we learned. So Bamidbar needs to be before Shavuot, in order that we've got a buffer between Shavuot and the curses of B'chukotai. So I understand. Bamidbar needs to be then. Why do I always want to have Tzav right before Pesach? That we haven't explained. So if you'll take a look, I should have underlined it. I apologize, I didn't. You see we have this little, go to the wide lines above that little boat I made over there. The second wide line above there, about a fifth of the way into the line, you have a star, an asterisk. Tzav, Kodem Pesach, Mipnei Shebitzav Medaber Bihagalat Kalim. Oh, Tzav talks about the aftermath of the battle. And we had the vessels of the Gentiles that needed to be, that were Tameh. Right, I was like, Tzav talks about the Agalat Kalim in Notar Kudshim. Tzav talks about the immersion, the purification of the vessels. V'agalat kelim mechanetz lama mikachim, and that we cleanse, purge our kelim before Pesach, when we lived in a less affluent time, and people would actually kosher their silverware and plates and pans and everything, not plates, pots for Pesach, as opposed to just buying new ones and having them put away. So therefore, we want to discuss that right before Pesach. That's why we have this concentration. We've got Tzav before Pesach. We've got Bamidbar before Shavuos. So we have few weeks to squeeze in these 9 parshiot. Therefore, that's why we have all of those doublings up. Okay, however, David's question is still a question, though we might have seen a hint towards an answer. David said, let's go look back at our chart. David said we could have taken care of this really quickly. On the 18th of April, we read Shemini. Let them read Tazria. That way, the 25th of April, we're reading Tazria Mitzora, and then they're reading Mitzora. And now we're back in sync with one another. Why do we wait so long to get aligned when we had the opportunity to take care of it? Start taking care of it the next Shabbos. By the Shabbos after that, we're good to go. A couple of reasons. 3 different approaches that I will share with you. One approach is based on what we just said. We want to have Bechukotai, and then Bamidbar as a buffer, and then Shavuot. Now, we each have that, but we don't have such a recognizable buffer. Because we're reading, this Shabbos, we're reading Bahar Bechukotai.
Double.
They're a double parsha. And Bahar deals with Shemitah. It's not such a it's not as obvious, as glaring a separation. Because it's, we're reading different parsha. We're not just reading the parsha with the curse. We're reading Bahar, we're reading Bechukotai. In Israel, they wanted there to be a more glaring buffer. So therefore they preferred to have Bechukotai as a standalone this Shabbos. That way the Shabbos after this one is a very clear buffer between Shavuot, the new year of Shavuot, and the curses of the previous year. That's one approach based on what we've just discussed. Another approach that's given is, so David asks, why don't we split up Tazria and Mitzorah? And that's exactly the point. We don't want to split up Tazria and Mitzorah. Tazria deals with the impurity of leprosy. Mitzorah deals with the impurity of leprosy.
Oh, and we don't want to hear about that 2 weeks in a row. 1 week is plenty.
Yeah, it's hard enough for the rabbi to speak about that one Shabbos. You want to ask me to speak about it 2 weeks in a row? When that can be avoided, we avoid that. We rather not deal with these impurities, right? We rather not stretch that out.
It's kind of like one parsha anyway. It's not really a disconnect there. It's like one unit.
Another approach is often the best way to answer a question. The best way to answer a question is to show, especially when you're learning in the Gemara, if you have a question on the Gemara, then the answer to the question is usually not an answer to the question. It's a breaking apart of the question. You realize your question was not a question. The question was based on a misunderstanding. Once you understand what the Gemara really meant, what the Gemara was saying, then you understand your question wasn't a question. Right? I was at a rabbinic conference the past 2 days in San Diego. It was AJOP, the American Association of Jewish Outreach Professionals. So they had a conference for the rabbis or assistant rabbis of kiruv friendly or kiruv oriented shuls, right? Shuls that are not in Monsey, not in Brooklyn, that are a little bit further out and deal with the wider community. And myself and many others are students of Ner Yisroel, the yeshiva in Baltimore, and are students of Rav Yaakov Weinberg, Zatzal, who was the Rosh Yeshiva there. And what was always amazing for me personally was when I would go to speak to Rav Weinberg Zatzal with a number of questions that were weighing me down, and really questions about direction for myself to take in the future. What was always amazing, he wouldn't answer my question. He would just help me clarify my questions and the situation until inevitably I would walk out of there thinking, what was so confusing when I walked in? What wasn't obvious to me? Right? Once he clarified it, it wasn't an answer to a question. It was a realization that the question was not a question. Coming back over here, the question is, why don't we get aligned earlier? That is assuming that different communities must, or at least should, be all aligned. And that's not necessarily true. Certainly, in times of old, before we had this, what does Ciner call it? A global village?
Oh.
Right? Before we had a global village, before we were, aware of what was happening with family and friends across the ocean, real time, right? I mean, so there are these different areas, and everyone should do what works best for them. And there's not necessarily a value, certainly, that Israel should have to adjust to us schleppers who are living outside of the Holy Land. They should have to, because these schleppers are, right? When we get our act together, we'll get our act together. Right? When they're good and ready, right? They're going to do what works for them. That the Yishuvim should be necessarily aligned with one another. Questionable value. And if they should, that they should do a dance to fall in step with the off-balance people? No. Why should they?
But who was suggesting that? Shouldn't the off-balance people try and do a...
That's us.
That's what
Right.
we try.
So whenever we'll get there, we'll get there.
We
They're not going to
that.
start to break things up and do this and do that. They want to get themselves to Bamidbar before we all want to land with Bamidbar before Shavuot.
Yeah.
And we're each going to get there.
So they do the best possible split, and then
For
we get
them.
there where we can.
For them.
Right.
Now, it'll be interesting. I have to take a look at a calendar next year where we're not going to get it together until July or August time, right? It'll be interesting to see what's going to be happening, right, before Shavuot. Who's getting it right and who's not, right? Who's going to have Bamidbar before Shavuot and who doesn't? Again, next year being that it's a leap year, so our accordion gets stretched out, we're not going to have like we have over here April 18th or 25th, Tazria Mitzora, Acharei Mod Kedoshim, and it's May 16th here, Bahar B'chukotai. We're not going to have the option, right? So it's going to be interesting to see what's going to be next year with Tzav, in terms of Tzav being before Shavuot. Though actually the halacha addresses that during a leap year, it won't be Tzav before Pesach, it'll be Mitzora by a Me'uberet. And that also works in a little bit, the Bir Halacha says, because there we also mention the earthen vessels needing to be broken, right? If they became impure through tzorah, through the mitzorah, there is no way that they can be purged. So there is still a little bit of a mention. So it'll be interesting to see what's going to happen next year, how we're going to get from mitzorah prior to Pesach to Bamidbar, who gets there between us and Eretz Yisroel, who gets there and who doesn't. Okay, so at this point, let me after so I just want to cover some a little more. So at this point, we have explained why we have double parshiot in general, why we have the concentration of double parshiot during this in this short segment of Vayikra, why Israel didn't hop to it and get it together and get aligned with us at the earliest possible point. And now what remains is what happens if a person is traveling. Or you have in Israel the people, you have American yeshivas in Israel who keep 2 days. The 8th day, Shabbos, was Pesach. They fell behind. So what do they do? If a person's traveling, what do we do? Right? How do we try to get ourselves aligned? So the American yeshivas in Israel, and I think in Zichron Yaakov, certain places where there are a lot of people traveling, what they do is as follows. Either the next Shabbos in Israel, they would have read April 18th. In Israel, those American yeshivas would have read Shmini and Tazria and Mitzorah.
Wow.
Okay? Or Shabbos afternoon of Pesach. For us it was Pesach, right? So those who didn't read Shmini that morning, who kept Pesach, they would read Shmini at Mincha. So what they'll do is instead of just reading the first Aliyah like we normally do, splitting that into 3, they'll read the entire parsha of Shmini, splitting it into 3. Right, which might be the longest Aliyah on record, whoever gets Shlishi, and that way they've caught up. And the next Shabbos they're there, Tazria Mitzorah. Now, in Israel, I think in Zichron Yaakov, there is, which is like a shtibel in Yerushalayim, I think every Shabbos during these weeks they have a double reading for those who want. Right? So in other words, on April 25th, they'll read Acharei Mot Kedoshim. After davening, they'll have someone read Tazria Mitzorah. Because let's say someone came to Israel on April 23rd. Right? So on April 18th, he heard Shmini. April 25th, he's going to hear Acharei Mot Kedoshim. He's going to miss out Tazria and Mitzorah. And therefore they'll read Acharei Mot Kedoshim, and afterwards they'll read Tazria and Mitzorah to enable that person to catch up. However, lahalacha, we're not so worried about this because the Kriyas HaTorah, the Torah reading, is not an individual obligation, it is a communal obligation. And therefore, I'm with the community, perhaps here in Irvine one Shabbos, in Israel the next Shabbos, and therefore I hear the Torah reading of that community. I might personally have my own obligation of what's called Shnaya Mikra Ve'echad Targum, of learning the parsha, reading the parsha twice along with an explanation once. So I might have a lot of work to do on the plane. I have a nice long plane ride to do it, so it's not such a problem. I might have a lot of personal catching up to do for my own personal learning obligation, but in terms of the reading obligation, that is not really my issue. It was said about the Vilna Gaon, which I will conclude with. I think I copied this. At a certain point, the Vilna Gaon was, right? Oh, so I mentioned, so they might read 4 parshiot, right? So he said there's a precedent. This is from the Or Sameach website. There's a precedent to a 4 parsha laning. In Tosfot Maseh Rav, they relate that when the Vilna Gaon, who was accused of something, was in prison, he was released from jail, he read all the 4 of the parshiot he missed at one time. So a person can decide that they want to make good on it and make it up as well as they can, but in terms of a real obligation, it's not a personal obligation, it is a tzibur obligation, so it is not the person's obligation.
In that particular case, he fulfilled a personal obligation, though, not a tzibur obligation, right?
Correct. And it was, even though he was not necessarily mechuyav, obligated, but he didn't want to miss that.
But he was mechuyav, wasn't he? On a personal level.
On a learning level,
yes.
Shnai Mikra Ve'echad Targum, and not on a Kriyas HaTorah. For that, I don't need a Torah reading. Right? I sit down with my Chumash and Rashi, or my Chumash and Targum, and I work my way through it.
He actually did the Kriyas thing.
He did an actual Kriyas HaTorah, 4 parshas.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'm a little confused. I wasn't, like David saying catch up, I wasn't necessarily suggesting that Israel should catch up to Eretz Yisrael? Why wouldn't we take the steps to go faster to catch up to them?
Okay, well, if you look at the chart, we're doing everything we can. Shmini is not an option. Tazrim Mitzorah is an option, we do it. Achemot is an option, we do it. Emor is not an option. Bahar B'chukotai is an option, and we do it.
Why is Emor not an option?
What are you going to pair it up with?
It seems like it's logically to pair it with Kedoshim, because they both deal with lots of laws.
But I already paired Achrayimot with Kedoshim.
Okay.
Because we have these seven pairs, which are our options. We have utilized every possible one. We can't go any faster than that.
Because you could never do a triple, huh? I mean, I agree with you.
Right.
Emor really goes with Kedoshim. It's a nice
We never organize a triple. We never organize a triple. Okay. Yashikoach, everybody.
Thank you.
We will call it over here.
And Rebecca.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Next week
Definitely.
we are on, of course, and we'll do a little something for Shavuot
Good idea.
next week.
That was worth the price. Thank you.